Pacers, Sixers tonight in what looks like will be a meaningless game for the Pacers. Maybe TJ McConnell returns, maybe he doesn't. But the Sixers built their team extremely uniquely, and as the Pacers enter a rebuild, can they learn anything from the Sixers? We'll talk about it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News, and today we are going to be the only basketball podcast not talking about UNC Kansas because the Pacers play the 76ers tonight, and that game means basically nothing for the Pacers. But what I like to do is when the Pacers play teams with unique builds like the Rockets and the Grizzlies and now the Sixers is talk to someone who's covered the opposing team for some amount of time and has seen that rebuild succeed or not succeed. And what can the Pacers learn from that as they embark on their first rebuild, their first teardown in my life? And joining me to talk about the Sixers, their rebuild, where they're at now, where they're headed, Mr. Bryan Toporek from Bleacher Report, the NBA Pod, my colleague at Forbes Sports, and Fansided. Brian, how's it going, man?
It's going well. How are you, Tony?
I'm doing well. I just had the wordiest intro ever, and I feel like I barely let you talk. But how are things in Sixers land? That team with James Harden and Joel Embiid is a free throw machine that is either awesome or terrible every night, it feels like.
Things have been kind of bleak the last week. I won't lie. It seemed like Embiid was at least the front runner for MVP for a couple months there. And then Tim Bontemps of ESPN drops this straw poll last week that has Nikola Jokic ahead. All the sports books respond in kind. The Sixers lose to the Pistons, and now Jokic seems to be running away with it. So, it's been an interesting week for us.
I've enjoyed Jokic and Embiid's battle for second place on my MVP ballot. Giannis is going to win for me, but I don't have a vote, so no one cares about that. What we're here to talk about, and I'll completely bury the lead. The Pacers will not do a process, air quotes,
Sure.
process, but I want to talk about the process, the good parts of it, the bad parts of it, what worked for the Sixers and what didn't. And ironic thing here is what ignited the process, would you say, was trading Jrue Holiday? Was that like the start of it to you?
I've always said it goes back even further. I think it starts with the Andrew Bynum trade is really, I guess that laid the seeds for the process because it was an all-in move that just went completely belly up. They trade Nikola Vucevic was in that deal. Mo Harkless was in that deal. They traded a lot of their young guys away. They traded an extra first-round pick in that deal. So when that didn't work out, Sam Hinkie comes in, gives his little spreadsheet presentation to the Sixers ownership group and is like, look, guys, you're kind of screwed here. Like, you only have one option. You can continue to run it back, and you're going to be a run-of-the-mill, like maybe squeak in as the 8th seed and get your brains beaten in the first round, or you can tear this thing down. You have no real pathway to a star other than the draft, and you're not going to be bad enough to get a star unless you tear this down. So then they hire him, trade Jrue during that 2013 draft, get Nerlens and Michael Carter-Williams, and they are off and running in rebuild land.
Yeah, the MCW one-year era was beautiful. I was going to try to make the parallel of trading a Holiday brother, igniting a rebuild, because the Pacers traded Justin Holiday, but you're right that is not perfect. I need a Bynum comp for the Pacers now. I can't use Bynum himself because that was a disaster for the Pacers.
Well, they have that in common at least.
That's right. One of only a few franchises with failed Bynum experiences. Maybe that's what ignites good rebuilds.
Yeah.
So, big picture though, look, the process is what it is. I don't want to relitigate what people think of that, but that was a unique strategy. Like Sam Hinkie had a plan, and he, by God, the league told him not to, but he stuck to it. Now that we're here, and they have Embiid, they had Simmons, whatever. Now that we're here, what about the process do you think worked and was successful? And what about it was a failure and something that can't ever be done again?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of what can't be done again, the league tried to intervene and make sure it can't be done again.
Kind of doing it, but yeah.
Yeah, but like it's more difficult now because the league flattened out the lottery odds and increased the number of teams that the lottery selects for. So it used to be, you have 25% chance and if you had the worst record in the league, and the lottery only chose those first 3 slots. So if you finish with the worst record, you are guaranteed to fall no lower than 4. Now it's, there's just a lot more variability in terms of the percentage of chances, even if you have the worst record in the league. Like, you still have a relatively decent chance to fall to 4 or 5. So it's more difficult to pull off the extent to what the Sixers did. I think a lot has been misunderstood about the process over the years, because like a lot of people do boil it down to like, oh, you could just suck for a couple of years and tank for high draft picks. And it's like, sure, that was one main pillar, and arguably the main pillar, because that's what got them Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. But, he also really tried to harvest these like fringe guys, these fringe gems. And I think that is something that gets lost in these rebuilds. A lot of people at the time the Sixers were really rebuilding compared them to the Orlando Magic. That was like the bad team rivalry. And the Magic were out here signing guys like Ben Gordon, who aren't going to factor in the long-term future, are going to make them a little bit better. And, Magic guys are saying like, oh, we need these locker room culture leaders. And Sixers people were like, who cares? You're going to be bad anyway. None of these guys are going to be here. Why not be as bad as you can possibly be? Increase your lottery odds more, and cycle through these guys on 10-day contracts. And now two-way contracts weren't a thing back then, but now you have two-way contracts that you can cycle through. So he found T.J. McConnell was one such example. Robert Covington was one such example. He found guys like Jeremy Grant, Rashawn Holmes in the second round as well. So the hit rate is super low. Like, there is a roster of 25 some players that played on each of those teams, and not all of them panned out. But the ones who did were worth their weight in gold. And, Robert Covington ended up being one of the main pieces they traded for Jimmy Butler a couple of years later. So I think that's one of the things you have to hit, not only on your main draft picks, which of course are, if you whiff on those, it's going to be much more difficult to do anything else of consequence. But hitting these moves on the margins is just as important.
Yeah, them and the Grizzlies have that in common to me as the big takeaways from somewhat successful rebuilds. And I think the Sixers, obviously, you call the process successful, but like that, didn't they get two? They got like a second for Tony Wroten, and they got two for Kendall Marshall in there. Like all these random little things that you're like, oh, there goes Sam Hinkie trading away a contributor. But this is good. Like getting these valuable things are important. Like snagging good seconds in the Karis LeVert trade was good business. Getting a second in the Torrey Craig trade was good business. Like those are the replicatable things that I think a lot of successful rebuilds have, is finding those little marginal trades that seem so stupid and pointless in the moment, but you look back and like, oh wow, that was really important. And then obviously, finding Jeremy Grant, even finding like Jakar Sampson was a good player for the Pacers for 2 years. Like that's a little tiny discovery that works, and talent evaluation is such a hard part to replicate, but that's a really important part of this stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to base your strategy on the draft, you need to be pretty good at the draft, and not
right.
Not every one of the picks hit for the Sixers. Not even every one of their big picks hit. Jahlil Okafor is their most noteworthy miss, but even Michael Carter-Williams 11, when Giannis goes a couple picks later, it's like, in retrospect, probably should have taken Giannis there, but they sold Michael Carter-Williams before anyone caught on that he wasn't as great as his inflated statistics might suggest. And they got a Lakers pick that just kept rolling over because the Lakers were too bad to actually convey it. So that didn't cash in. But yeah, I mean, using they used some of their cap space to take on bad contracts as well. So they took on JaVale McGee's expiring. It was like 10 or 12 million, and they got a first rounder out of it. The famed Sacramento Kings trade, when the Kings were trying to clear out all this cap space, and ended up they take on Nick Stauskas and a couple other guys. And
please clarify that the Sacramento Kings were clearing cap space to sign a 32-year-old Rajon Rondo, 33-year-old.
I believe that was the plan. And
gosh, the Kings.
But it worked out. Honestly, it might have worked out in the Kings' favor, because the picks ended up swapping. The Kings get De'Aaron Fox at 5 instead of 3. Where the Sixers, used that pick to trade up for Markelle Fultz. So Sam Hinkie's ghost actually haunted them in that regard.
Yeah, that I didn't remember. That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I do remember the Kings swap being so valuable for so long and then not being a big deal, but I forgot about the Fultz aspect of it. Yeah. Man, where the Sixers now, Fultz pans out. That's a whole different conversation. That stuff obviously matters. Hitting those draft picks matter. And look, for the Pacers, who have had, outside of Duarte, like a pretty rocky draft run since Kevin Pritchard took over. Like this is like the thing for his resume, running the Pacers to me, is this pick. Like every trade he's made has been pretty damn good to me, like value wise, starting from Paul George all the way to where they are now. But if you miss this pick, if you miss whatever they end up, 6, 7, 5, 4, whatever, if they miss this pick, like it might not matter at all. They might just be running out a crappy team next year. So it matters a lot in that sort of talent evaluation part, which the Sixers were about 60%, I'd say, on high first rounders. They've got to hit it. They've got a lot of other stuff in place that makes it really important with Duarte and Halliburton. They just have to hit it. Hey guys, let's take a short little break here to talk about the good folks over at PrizePicks. NBA fans, are you looking for a daily fantasy option for the NBA? You've got to try the award-winning app PrizePicks. Daily fantasy made easy. I love it. I know you will too. It's easy to use. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections. You go up to 10 times your entry on any entry. It's just you versus the projected numbers. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's super easy. It's safe. They offer fast withdrawals, and you can use their award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. PrizePicks offers any prop you can think of. Points scored, rebounds, even steals. They allow mixed sport entries. You can do Pacers and MLB if you want, with opening day coming up super soon. And PrizePicks does not offer just NBA, MLB. They've also got college football, NFL, college basketball, soccer, MMA, and more for a limited time. PrizePicks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our listeners. You can get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. But you must use the code NBA. That's right, exclusive offer for Locked On fans. Sign up today. Use the code NBA for $50 for free if a player in your PrizePicks entry, your first PrizePicks entry, scores a single point. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I also want to tell you guys about the good folks over at BetOnline.net, your number one sports source for all your sports betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, including this week's Masters Championship odds, podcast, and reviews for all the different leagues this season. NBA, MLB, Masters obviously is all on there, and BetOnline. It's your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports even, and sports scores. It's all there. Head over to that website today at betonline.net or use your mobile device to hop on there today. Learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Follow-up question number 2 on the process. Sort of the process. I keep calling it the process. I should call it the Sixers rebuild because Brand did some stuff at the end, I guess. The burner gate and all that timeline makes happened.
There were separate eras. The Hinkie era was the process, and everything after Hinkie very much not process.
Is there anyone like? Okay, let's get rid of OKC. Like, who would have won? Sorry, I'm phrasing this question poorly. Hinkie getting fired clearly had something to do with outside forces in the league wanting to get in. But I'm always kind of like, besides the league wanting them to be good and fans to spend money, shouldn't other teams want this to be an option? I don't know. I was always surprised that outside pressure made that happen. I'm glad that Presti can bring it back, even though I'm very anti-taking. This is the Pacers' first time playing the lottery odds game in my life. I mean, they picked 10 for Paul George. They picked Eric Dampier 10 in 1996, and they picked inside of 10 in the 80s. But that's it. They've always been late lotto or playoffs. This is their first time doing the ping pong balls thing. Luck is always a huge factor. The Grizzlies know that. The Sixers know that. The Pelicans know that. The Cavs know that. But with the balance of luck and scouting, how much luck do you personally feel like is involved in these sort of rebuilding steps?
Yeah, I mean, I think luck is going to determine where you pick. And then from there, and, that in turn determines the number of prospects you're going to be able to choose from. So if you end up falling to 8, 9, 10, there are going to be 8 guys that you don't even have the chance to choose because they're going to be gone, or maybe you trade up, but you're not going to get whoever at the very top. You're not going to get Banchero this year, or Chet Holmgren this year if you fall to 8 or 9 without trading up. But from there, I mean, I think the Grizzlies in particular are a great example of you don't necessarily need a high lottery pick to hit on guys. I mean, they're just every single pick they make, it seems like they just hit it out of the park. It's unbelievable how successful they've been. So, I think a large part of it, and I think this is one area where Hinkie might have erred, is kind of you have to look ahead a couple of years and try to anticipate trends in the NBA. So, the Sixers spent 3 high lottery picks in back-to-back years on centers, which was during the early days of the Golden State era where all of a sudden 3-point shooting and small ball was going to become a thing. So the Okafor pick in particular was just bad already, just on the surface bad, and just got progressively worse given how the NBA trended. So, for the Pacers or any other team playing the lottery odds this year, you have to kind of project, okay, what major trends do we see developing over the next couple of years? Like, is there going to be a counterbalance to small ball? Like maybe what we're seeing the Cavs this year, where they're trotting out 7-foot Lauri Markkanen at the 3. Like, our team's going to try to pivot back in that direction, or are there certain archetypes of players that you want? For a big man, do they need X, Y, and Z skills? Or for a guard, what types of guards do you want? What types of wings do you want? So I think figuring that out is the most important aspect. And then, there's going to be a relative consensus in terms of like, here are the top 4 guys, and then here are the next 4 or 5 guys. But you have to trust your own scouting department, your own board, and you shouldn't be afraid to go off board, because like, look at what happened this past year. We thought going into this draft, we thought there were, a clear cut top 4 guys. It was Cade, it was Jalen Green, it was Evan Mobley, and it was Jalen Suggs. The Raptors were like, actually, Scotty Barnes. We're going to go with Scotty Barnes over Jalen Suggs. And I think that decision at least raised some eyebrows leading up to the draft. But look at them now. Like, no one is questioning that.
Yeah, this draft is loaded. The last draft was loaded, but there's like a pretty damn good chance Scotty's the best player from that draft. Like, he is crazy good. And Toronto, to something you just said, like about looking ahead of trends in the league. Toronto has it to me. They are like, you are going to be huge and skilled, right? Every player they trot out is like 6'8" to 7 foot tall and can dribble and pass and cut and isn't just boxed into one thing. And that's what makes them so dangerous. It's like, oh my God, Achua is shooting threes now. Oh, okay. Right. Like, Scotty Barnes can do these 7 things he could never do before. Oh my God, Chris Boucher can dribble now. It's like, how do they keep doing this? That is the kind of stuff that is important. And so for the Pacers, I think thinking about skill in general is going to be pretty important as this draft comes up, because maybe they do have the same thing. Maybe they end up at 4 and they're like, I don't know, whoever you name a name. I haven't scouted everybody. Ben Mathurin, AJ Griffin, whatever. They're like, oh, we like him more than Jaden Ivey or whatever. I'm not saying I would do that. I just, they have to be thinking like that as they make this pick. And that's always the hard part of this, because I'm not the expert. I don't know what's in the room and what they're thinking, but you have to trust the team scouting, from our seats, and you never know what goes into it, because you could pick Scotty Barnes, or, I pull up the 2015 draft because we were just talking about Jahlil Okafor. Like, I remember leading up to that draft, everyone thought the Lakers were picking him at 2, right? For every day until about 2 days before.
Yeah.
No one knew anything about Porzingis or Hazonia. Like, Moutier was going to be top 3 that year too, right? Like, all this stuff just changes so fast that you have to be ready for a lot of situations, and you have to be ready to pick the guy that you think is going to be the best mold for your team and in the NBA going forward.
Yeah, I still remember I was, at Bleacher Report early in my tenure, and Kevin Ding was our Lakers writer at the time. And I think he was the one who broke the news the morning of the draft that the Lakers were going to take D'Angelo Russell over Jahlil Okafor. And I was just like, because Russell would have been a really good fit next to Nerlens and Embiid, but no such luck. So yeah, I mean, you have to, you have to pray the board breaks your way, because one surprise can just totally throw off what you were planning to do. And even, for Orlando this past year, maybe they didn't think Jalen Suggs was going to be there at 5, and they were weighing, like, do we go Barnes? Do we go Kuminga? Do we go Giddey? And then all of a sudden Suggs is there at 5. So you need, your scouting department needs to do the work on everyone, just in case there is a draft day curveball.
Yeah, that's the hardest part from our seats, is to know what, and especially because we don't know what calls they get about, what trades are available, what all that. Like, that we're not talking about what I said we would talk about now. Just general team stuff. Like, when we evaluate trades as people, like, I sometimes feel like we're doing a disservice, because we only are analyzing what happened. And like, yeah, that's what the front office did. They evaluated and said this is the best thing for them. I don't know what other offers there were. Like, what if this was the best thing for the team? And sometimes you could say, yeah, well, it doesn't look like good value for my seat. Like, that's fine, but I never know, like, what else was there for Torrey Craig? What else was offered for Caris LeVert? No, granted, I think both of those trades were great, but I don't know what else there was to evaluate them. So, looking back, even with the draft, you never know, like, if they pick Jahlil Okafor at 3 for the Sixers, for example, did they just love him, or were they like, we got crappy offers for the pick, we'll just take Jahlil? That kind of stuff makes these rebuilds hard. Okay, we'll actually get back to what we were talking about, the Sixers rebuild, if it can apply to the Pacers at all, beyond the process part, right? Like, strip everything down. If you don't have a long-term deal, if you're not going to be a star, you're tradable here. What did the Sixers, we kind of talked about this, but what did you feel like they did really well in the rebuilding stages? And this can extend into the Brand and Colangelo phases. What did they do well at that stage to get to where they are now?
Yeah, I think it really was the moves on the margins that paved the way for a lot of the success around Embiid and Ben Simmons for the time that he was with the team. I mean, the Dario Saric selection, and they traded for him as well. I think that was 2014. I think they traded down. They knew Orlando wanted Elfrid Payton, so they take him at 10, trade down 2 spots. I think they got their own first rounder back as part of that deal as well. So, trade down 2 spots, get at first. Any team would say yes to that. I think one of the tricky things for the Sixers was trying to figure out when was the time to hit accelerate on this thing. So I would argue they might have done it a little bit too early, and some of the moves, some of their all-in moves, some of their consolidation moves, in terms of just pure value, Covington and Saric, and I think they give up a 2020 suit or a 20, I don't remember the year, 2018, 2019 second round pick for Jimmy Butler. Fine. Not, value-wise, you do that deal in retrospect. The Tobias Harris trade, I was never a fan of at the time. Yeah, I mean, because you knew he was about to be a free agent. You were going to have to overpay him. There were a lot of teams with cap space. The Knicks were floating out there and were very openly threatening, we will sign this guy to a max if you don't. So you have to be careful with, what those moves are. Once you have your guys, your franchise guys locked in, you have to make sure you're building around them correctly. And I think the good thing from the Pacers' perspective, especially given what we've seen out of Tyrese Halliburton since he's come to Indiana, but even in Sacramento this year is incredible too. He is going to be the connective tissue that they need. And I think he's going to fit with a lot of guys. It's not, he isn't Ben Simmons where he has such pronounced strengths and weaknesses that you are somewhat limited in terms of the guys that you can have building around him. But Tyrese Halliburton is just an incredible basketball player. And, he's going to make all of the other guys around him better too. He's just such a gifted passer, a 3-level scorer, improving offensively as well. So I think the Pacers, you could talk to a lot of Sixers folks right now, and especially given how James Harden looks on some nights, I think a lot of Sixers people, what you were talking about earlier with this was the whole thing all year was weighing potential Ben Simmons trades because no one knew what any of these offers were. A couple might have trickled out and they got immediately refuted. So we have no idea. But I think a lot of people in retrospect would be are we sure that Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield, if that was on the table, wasn't better than James Harden for the Sixers?
Noted.
Yeah.
No. Indiana has noted your pessimism. One more break here, guys, to talk about the good folks over at Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models of vehicles, it is impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure the often pointless and intimidating questioning? Is your auto to see an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only the brand the warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. You can save time and money when using Rock Auto. You can spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the same parts at a chain store or at a car dealership. But at rockauto.com, you'll get it for cheaper. They're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are always reliably low for every customer, and they have everything you could need. Brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to see all the solutions available for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now to see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. I agree with all that. And I think the accelerate button point is really fascinating because after the deadline, Kevin Pritchard does his presser and he's like, we're not rebuilding, right? We re-steered the ship and we're going. And maybe they will, maybe they won't, because they also said they wouldn't trade players this year and they traded a ton of players, right? So actions always speak louder than words, as it has for all of basketball time. But, this summer, I think we'll actually learn. I mean, obviously, when they can make moves, we'll learn. But what would be better for them with Halliburton on year 3 of a rookie deal and Duarte in year 2 and Isaiah Jackson year 2 is rent out your cap space, right? Do what the Grizzlies have done for 2 straight summers, 3. I mean, forever it feels like, right? Rent out that space. You just talked about the Sixers doing it with JaVale, and the Kings, good. That's what the slow rebuilds do. They get assets for their space, and the Pacers could do that. But I think because they said they're not rebuilding, they're not going to, right? They're going to use it to try to get the right pieces. And Halliburton's good enough that, I guess that's fine to me. But the accelerate button part of it, that's what's going to be challenging to see is, Do they try to take it slow this summer for just 1 year because of the timing of the rookie scale deals, or do they really just say, all right, we are Indiana, we do not do this, we're going back to being good? That will be very telling about their strategies.
Yeah, I mean, it's the toughest thing to navigate, I think, as you're rebuilding. And then sometimes you're like Memphis or you're like Cleveland this year, where you just kind of stumble into like, oh, okay, yeah. we weren't planning on being this good, but maybe we just are now. And honestly, that's like the most fun time, because then next year,
no expectations yet.
Right, but then next year you start to actually add the expectations. So yeah, I mean, given how few teams are projected to have cap space this summer, and given some of the teams that seem like they're going to be in need of a shakeup, I think it'd be very smart for the Pacers to use their cap space, not on free agents necessarily, but rent it out and try to get additional assets if they can.
I'll probably do a podcast on this in the summer, but the best thing that could happen to the Pacers this summer is Bradley Beal says, yeah, I don't want to be in Washington anymore. Because then he could go to another team and all these teams will try to be clearing space for him. And that's how the Pacers can swoop in, right? They want chaos this summer. Zach LaVine to be like, F Chicago, I hate this. Like that's what the Pacers want. Is that likely? No, not at all, especially in a low cap space environment. But that's what they want. All right, an actual basketball game will take place tonight between the Sixers and Pacers. The Pacers don't care. The Sixers do. They're still kind of fighting for seeding, although it seems like looking at the East, 4 looks kind of nice. But, that's up to the interpretation of every team. Anywho, they do play a game tonight, and Dan Burke will be back in Indy, and he made the Pacers defense incredible. And everybody kind of knew that. And then the second he was out of the franchise, it became apparent how obvious that is. The Pacers are now 27th in defense this year, 14th last year under Bjorkgren Ball. And I love talking about Dan Burke because it was crazy how many players I would talk to, especially rookies, who are like, yeah, this assistant coach has made me better on defense. Like, that is such a rare thing to hear from players. How much has he helped the Sixers in that way?
Yeah, I think he's helped a ton. I think it was more apparent last year than this year. The absence of Ben Simmons certainly did not help their defense. And, for all of that James Harden brings to the table, defense is not one of them. So he's done a good job hiding James as much as he can, and, adopting more of his like 1 through 4 switching, and they still play drop with Joel Embiid, but now, Doc Rivers is trotting out DeAndre Jordan's corpse as their backup 5. So, Coach Burke is working with very, very strong limitations with his system. So, again, it was more apparent last year than this year, but we've seen, Matisse Thybulle obviously came into the NBA as an incredible defender. He's only gotten better. It's still inconsistent. Like, there are some games where he just absolutely wrecks world, and there's some times where he's just overly aggressive and gets in foul trouble right away. The concerns about what he does to the Sixers spacing offensively keeps his minutes in check, but he is one of the most gifted off-ball defenders I've ever seen, and just creates a ton of havoc on that end. Tyrese Maxey has just all around gotten significantly better as a player, but defensively too, you've seen it. I think, I'm sure it's Coach Burke. I think just being around Matisse Thybulle in particular, Furkan Korkmaz as well as credited Matisse. Like, a lot of these guys are learning from how Thybulle anticipates. So I think that has been a big positive for the Sixers, that their assistant coaching staff has done all they can to mitigate the rotation decisions of their head coach.
Yeah, drop coverage, the Dan Burke special. I mean, Miles Turner and him were a very good fit on the defensive end, I'll say. Like, that made that pairing made the Pacers defense so good for so long. And now they're 27th in defense. They would really like to, I think in retrospect, they would really like to redo the coaching changes they made in the summer
probably.
of 2020. I mean, I think that's obvious just given the results, but it's such a franchise-changing summer that was. It's been fun to see Dan Burke, and even Popeye Jones from that staff, and Bill Bano was just in Indy with Detroit. Like, to see those guys doing well with other franchises is fascinating and makes that summer look even stranger. But I love to see Dan Burke, especially after on a Fox Sports broadcast doing the I hate Joel Embiid crap, and then going to Philly and now coaching Joel Embiid. Has he done an interview about that? Has that come out?
Yeah, it was early last year. They buried the hatchet quickly. Embiid loved it. He's he Lord knows he's dished out enough trash talk over the years.
That was the first thing I thought of when he got hired. There was that exact. I wonder how he feels about Harden. He doesn't have any good Fox Sports interviews about it. All right.
No, I haven't seen anything yet.
We'll make it happen. He'll be the associate head coach for a game, and I'll ask him about it. The last question was, you told me now your answer has changed due to some potential TJ McConnell news, but look, there is a game. We talked about Dan Burke, and the Pacers don't want to win, but I mean, they're pretty much locked into 5. Outside of them going 3-0 against Philly, Brooklyn to close the season, they're pretty much locked into 5. They would love one more Blazers win, but they're pretty much locked into 5. It doesn't really matter if they win or lose. Either way, the result doesn't matter. Do the Sixers, who it looks like Joel Embiid and James Harden are going to play, win by more or less than 15 points?
I think less than, and maybe this is just the recent Pistons loss coloring my perception, but you just never know which version of this team is going to show up. Like they lost to the Pistons and then blew out the Hornets, a much better team 2 nights later. So if that focused, dialed in version shows up, cool. They might win by 20 or 30 because, the Pacers are just so depleted health wise. But the fact that TJ McConnell might play makes me think if he does play, I think they lose by, or they win by less than 15. And I'm not even ruling out a loss at this point. Again, it's just they can play up or down to their level of competition. They came close to beating the Suns and the Bucks in recent days, and then you lose to the Pistons. So I don't know which version of this team shows up.
The Pacers have lost 7 in a row, including to the Pistons Sunday night, which was an impressive failure in the fourth quarter, playing against the guys that Pistons had out there. To not be able to win that game was a stunningly good finish for the Pacers game where they are. In that 7-game losing streak, Kings lost bad, right? Pistons lost bad, but at the same time, only by 9 to the Hawks, by 7 to the Nuggets, by 5 to the Celtics, right? They've lost 7 in a row, but they're playing better recently. I would probably say 11. The line's probably something like 14. It was 14 when they played Boston, but I think I'll take Sixers by 11. Joel Embiid always punks the Pacers, and especially Miles Turner, but he's not playing. But they have nobody to put on him. Goga's too slow. Isaiah Jackson's too skinny. I mean, he could have 30 by halftime. So my official prediction is Sixers by about 11. Because Joel Embiid's not going to play in the second half.
No, but he's gunning for MVP. He's going to try to put up 50.
That's right. That's true. He could go for 45 points because he needs the trophy. I keep seeing this. This is unrelated. We're done talking about the topics I have listed for you. LeBron plays against OKC tonight, right? And I keep seeing people saying as he goes to the scoring title, he's going to go for 70 points.
Yeah.
Do you put any stock in the MVP race in the last week of the season? I feel like everything is settled. You got to be done at this point.
No, I think a lot of people, I do not think it is settled. I mean, I think Jokic is probably going to win, but I'm sure, Embiid last night gave a quote, a very salty quote about the race. So it is front and center in his mind, and he's been campaigning through the media for the last week or two about it. So
yes, he has.
Yeah,
yes, he has.
He and Drew Hanlon both. So I think he is. He's going to try to have some impact performances. It might be too little, too late. But frankly, if they have to trade him not winning MVP and they actually win a title this year, I think and I hope he would make that trade any day of the week.
I assume he would. He seems like someone desperate to be at least a conference finalist at this stage of his career. Bryan, thank you very much for the time and letting me go off subject many times because I don't get to talk about rebuilding very much. The Pacers have never done this before. Where can people follow you and all your work going forward?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Toporek, so BTOPOREK. You can find me. I cover the Sixers and salary cap stuff at Forbes Sports, and I am the co-host of the NBA podcast, which you can find wherever podcasts are found. So, Tony, thank you for having me. And anytime you want to chop it up about rebuilding, you know where to find me.
Bryan hosts the NBA pod with Morton. And if you don't know Morton is Danish, and he is currently in America because the first Danish player, Ife Lundenberg, I can't say his name, just debuted in Suns Thunder. So that is super cool for Morton. I'm stoked that he got to see that. Although I think it's funny that he thought it was going to be that game because the Suns were going to beat the doors off the Thunder. And the Thunder ended up winning by so much that he gets in garbage time in a loss. But whatever, it's very cool that he got to see that happen. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. Pacers Sixers will, of course, be talking about it tomorrow if McConnell plays. Obviously, that's the story of the game. How does McConnell look playing for the first time in months with the new team, with the new roster? We're breaking it all down here on Locked On Pacers. Until then, everybody have a great day.